This program is powered by thevirtual.show, making your offline events virtual. Ladies and gentlemen, the host of WEBIT Virtual, Dr. Plamen Russev.
Hello, and welcome, wonderful WEBIT community, to WEBIT Virtual's week on CyberTech. It's the most important topic of this week. We talk about cybersecurity, and we talk about how we can improve that and to make sure that we, the humans, live a better, more secure and protected life. I'm sure for those of you who have been with us yesterday and the day before, you have doubts. You've heard a lot of opinions. Yesterday, you've heard the person who economists calls the cybersecurity guru saying, we are all being traced anyway. So why would you expect that one more app that was about the contact tracing would be such a big issue if you already have 100 more tracing you every single place you'd go, every single thing you do? He went further. He said, Google knows who you sleep with. Thanks God I'm monogamous and everyone knows that. So it's not only Google in that particular aspect. But going for the real threats, I would say COVID is escalating a lot the threats that we see in cyber world, and tens of organizations, including WHO and others, have been warning that we see 5 to 10-fold increase in the cybersecurity threats, and that's very serious. On the top of that, 70% already of the companies plan to increase their infrastructure and investment in cybersecurity solutions. Having that in mind, obviously, we have been involving a lot of great experts from all around the world, including yesterday's participants from the Chief Cybersecurity Officer of one of the largest European companies and one of the largest in the world, Siemens, VMware, and others, to join to discuss and to hopefully shed some light and get you prepared. There are a lot of reports. We're all aware of the real threats. And let's talk a little bit broader, not only companies, but people, our own phones, our own computers. COVID-19 tax rebate phishing lures encouraging recipients to browse a fake website that collects financial and tax information. Does it sound like familiar to you? Don't open, don't follow. Phishing emails coming from different governmental agencies, ministries of health, World Health Organization, directing to some specific measures. They have again embedded malware. Just be careful. Multiple phishing emails luring targets to fake copies of Center of Disease in US and all type of centers for control of disease around Europe and the rest of the world that are collecting your information and asking you to fill in credentials. Don't do it. How do you make a difference? And of course, everyone knows the exploits, the known exploits in Windows. All this together is making the digital world kind of unsecure world for people who are not prepared. Well, you can make some preclusions or use some critical thinking to make sure you know what is happening. If there is poor grammar or punctuation and spelling, or design and quality of the email isn't like the one you expect from the tax department, or which one if you received and you know it's not. The addresses to you are not by name, but dear colleague, dear friend, dear whatever, dear customer. If there is some threat or false sense of urgency, always be cautious. Directly solicit personal or financial information. Never do this. No banks, anyone is asking you this, to do it like this. So that's the critical part of thinking you might give. But I will be having here special guests today in the studio who will shed more light towards all these challenges and talking a little bit deeper about the general threat of privacy and security we're facing and particularly experiencing due to COVID-19. And I have no more patience to present you our special guests. Let's start with the first one.
Monica Melton is an assistant editor innovation at Forbes, covering cybersecurity and venture capital. She has covered politics at Politico, entertainment for Time Out New York, but her most fascinating beat has been covering the intersection of technology, finance, and entrepreneurship.
Monica, hello. Such a pleasure to have you with us.
Likewise. Thank you, Dr. Russev. I'm well. Greetings from New York.
Greetings to New York from rainy Bulgaria.
It's also a rainy day here. Look at that.
You see, people often forget that we are all exposed to similar conditions and threats. Everyone feels different, everyone feels special, but actually this COVID crisis shows us that we all, the humankind, have to deal with one and the same challenges, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's very on theme for cybersecurity, as that's something that across the board we'll all be dealing with. So there's that equalizer in all of this for sure.
Yesterday, I've been discussing with our guests in the studio and shared something which I'm not sure how will resonate with you, but also with all other three guests in the studio today from different media. You're currently representing Forbes, but you've been working for such great media, and you represent the voice that comes as emanation of a lot of research, a lot of distinguishing between fake news and real news. I would be more than grateful to hear more about this. But what I said is that the new normal hopefully will be the normal, because I personally didn't like the previous normal in which we were killing all the animals we could kill. There were species getting extinct every other day. We were damaging the nature. We were so irresponsible in our lifestyles. Hopefully this threat, of course, we'll be talking about cybersecurity, but in general, the threat that we are going through will give us a new perspective on sustainability, resilience, inclusion, and obviously responsible lifestyle. What do you think, Monica?
Absolutely. I think that where we were before is completely unsustainable, and this is definitely demonstrated across different facets of life, like you said, in terms of environmental inequality, especially even along the digital divide. We're even seeing just the areas of inequality and unsustainability that this crisis has created. But I do think it is an opportunity for a new but better normal, right? We don't want to go back to what we had before, but hopefully something more evolved and better.
Thank you so much, Monica. With your permission, I will introduce our next participants, and then we start our exciting discussion, all of us together. Here is the next guest of today's studio.
Rob Pegoraro is a columnist at USA Today and a contributing writer at Yahoo Tech Finance. He writes about computers, gadgets, telecom, social media, apps, and other things that beep or blink. He has met most of the founders of the internet and once even received an email reply from Steve Jobs.
Welcome back, Rob.
Hello.
Hello. It's always good to see someone that you haven't seen for like 24 hours.
24, 23, give or take.
Thank you for joining us back to the studio. Yesterday, you were making your invaluable contribution to our discussion in this part of the Thought Leadership Summit. Today, in your role as a media representative and moderator, today you will be in your role as answering my questions. And
happy to help.
I look forward to hear your thoughts and ideas and vision, and of course the researches that you as a journalist has been doing in the area that you cover for quite some time already. Thank you for joining. Let me introduce our next participant in the studio.
Luca Zorloni is a business and internet editor at Wired Italia, covering China, telcos, privacy, and Italian economy topics. He was the former business editor at Il Giorno, an Italian daily newspaper, and a contributor for Forbes Italia and Business Insider Italia.
Hello, hello. How are you, Luca?
Hi, hello. Greetings from Milan, Italy.
Greetings to Milan, Italy. Buongiorno. No, actually, it's not buongiorno now.
No, it's buonasera.
Buonasera. Buonasera, Milan. Buonasera, Italy. Buonasera, Luca. Grazie mille for joining, and look forward to hear your thoughts, your ideas. You are in a city that's the hearts and souls of a lot of Europeans were with for a long time at the very beginning of this terrible crisis. We've been hosting Professor Ciccone, who is the current president of the Emergency Care Association, European Association, and also the person who most probably has seen and treated the majority of or a lot of the sick people in Lombardy in the hospital, which he's head of the emergency. So I look forward to hear now your point of view on CyberTech, on the threats, and hopefully we will be giving some great deal of advice, because we're not here to stop attacks. We're here to prevent people from getting caught by them.
For sure.
So thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And our last member of the panel today.
Salim Essaid is a reporter at Euronews, working in media for the past decade, covering news and feature stories for outlets including Time Magazine, CNN, NHK World, Agence France Presse, and the Associated Press.
Salam alaikum. How are you, Salim?
Alaikum salam. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Eid Mubarak. And hopefully we will hear from you some great news from Middle East. Hopefully we will hear some positive news. But at the same time, I look forward to hear what is happening in the region, what are the threats that you are facing there, and some deep dive in that particular region. Hopefully we'll hear that from you.
Definitely.
Shukran. Now let's go all together. Dear ladies and gentlemen, let's start with my first question, which I hope to have a wonderful discussion. Let's not separate here the answers. Let's have it all as a collective work, collaborative work. So my first question is to all of you, and I'm sure the gentleman in the studio will allow Monica to start first with that. What is the real outcome in cybersecurity point of view from COVID-19? What have you seen, and what are the lessons we have learned?
Yeah,
Monica?
So yes, thank you. That in terms of lessons, there is no kind of final lesson to take away, because it's very much still unfolding, I'd say. But right off the bat, we're seeing just a much larger influx in the number of attacks. Here in the US, the SEC has reported a 35% increase in the number of fraud complaints. That's just one instance on the enterprise side, but the same thing is happening across healthcare infrastructures. It's happening throughout all enterprises. And one of the more immediate challenges is spending, right? So Gardner has just forecast that spending will actually decrease over last year. This year we'll spend about 3.5 trillion on IT, which includes cybersecurity. This is actually down 8% from last year, where we spent closer to 4 trillion. It doesn't seem like a large amount, but if you think about the higher influx of threats and these very COVID-specific threats in terms of, some of the ones that you've already mentioned, but stimulus scams. There's now a figure for mask scams in the U.S. 800 million have already been lost to mask scams alone. People saying that they will deliver on these large orders and then falling through. So that's going to continue to happen, unfortunately. So we have this twofold thing where companies need to be very judicious with their financial resources, but they also are facing a much higher volume of threats. So that's an inverse and unfortunate relationship. So that's going to be the biggest thing in the beginning, is from the financial hit.
Thanks, Monica. Yeah, there's been some decrease, 18 to 19 of like 8% as per Gartner, as we've discussed in advance. So we most probably will see a huge increase in 2020. But let's see someone else now from the panel to take a lead and to have the different answers.
I don't think
Rob,
we have learned the lesson yet,
Luca.
Because as you mentioned before, a lot of people is asking why do they have to care about the contact tracing app security. They say I have tons of apps on my phone. Why do I have to care about once more? Well, these apps are really, really critical, and the data they collect are really sensitive. And we see in Qatar a few days ago that Amnesty International found out that there is a bug, a vulnerability. You can just generate a sort of identity number that lets you get the QR code that allow you to get this app. And through this app, you can get a lot of data about the people, like their GPS location, where they are doing their quarantine, or names or names. So we are dealing with very sensitive data, and a lot of people don't understand that yet. So I hope this could be a real lesson, and I hope that we care more about it.
So I'm concerned about
Rob, please.
two risks I see that are a lot more present. On the one hand, when you can no longer actually directly see any of your colleagues in person, all your communications are through email or some other electronic medium.
So how can I be sure that you're not a deep fake now, Rob?
Right. All of your interactions with coworkers are a threat or an attack surface for phishers. So I'm going to be watching to see if there's more spear phishing to try to get people to think it really is your CEO or your InfoSec guy, whoever, telling you to do this or to do that to install this program. Because, you can't just walk over to their desk and say, did you really tell me that? So it's going to be really important that everyone know what sort of out-of-band mechanism, whether it's just a plain old phone call, a text message, a Facebook message you could use outside of your corporate communication system to verify that the message came from who you thought it was. The other one is on our devices, because so many of us are now, as we should, wearing masks outside. Facial recognition breaks. And Apple's moved so far as to say, we'll make it easier for you to switch to entering the passcode on your phone. What I think that's going to mean in practice is people will have to use easier passcodes, because if you can't have Face ID unlock your phone automatically, and instead you're punching in these digits and letters 50 times a day, you're not going to go something complex. I really wish people had stuck with things like the fingerprint recognition on my own phone and what you had on older iPhones and on the new iPhone SE, which works without a mask, works even if, like me, you've grown a beard over the last 3 months. I fear that the phone industry in the race to adopt a sci-fi feature and make the screen that much bigger has now set themselves up for a new phone security problem.
Thank you so much, Rob. Yeah, definitely makes a lot of sense. And these are very practical things that we definitely need to see solution very, very fast. But to wrap up, you see those two factors, which I like to talk later upon: the distant working. Obviously, working from home brings a lot, the very high level of risk. And then we would need to go for a different type of authentication in front of our own phones, but also in general. All right. And Salim, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I think this current situation has really highlighted our dependency online. Like we knew that before, millennials were using the internet more, and we knew that the dependency was increasing. But it seems like during the COVID-19 lockdown, that more people that were depending on to do everything online, from personal to financial matters. And it kind of highlighted tomorrow's problem, something that we thought was tomorrow's problem today. And it's making people question their daily activities, how much information they're personally revealing online. And I think it's a perfect time to address this early on rather than later, how we look at our daily functions. Definitely here in the Middle East, this is something that has been addressed. In our work environments, as Rob said, working remotely, we're, even though many people do work remotely around the world, but I think a much larger majority has all of a sudden. So we're rethinking, what are secure practices and systems that we can use to communicate with one another, to communicate effectively, and to operate safely, during this lockdown.
Thank you so much, Salim. Now, for all of you, you are all journalists with your own impact and audiences, etc. How do you cover these days the threats related to COVID and in general? So what is your approach to the topic? Monica, to start with you.
Sure. I think in terms of a news coverage standpoint, because there's kind of rapid fire attacks every day, we're learning about an even bigger one that had a much larger price ticket. I'm thinking of Fresenius healthcare system. It's one of the biggest systems in Europe for hospitals, but even here, I think that it's just kind of encompassing and recognizing patterns and trends. And we're hearing about all of these new threats in the headlines. And also the kinds of attacks are changing, right? They're growing far more sophisticated. There's now one called, snake ransomware with this encryption that's relatively hard to crack, but it's just becoming over a much larger surface. So I think when we start to kind of piece these things together, we can sort of recognize what's happening on that front. And scams are now happening in places that we hadn't previously thought to look, right? So, just as much as this has been a very harrowing experience for our healthcare systems, financial systems, all enterprises, people are also seeing opportunities in this, which is a very, kind of disturbing thing, but it's definitely an opportunity for some. Right, so the same people, the same bad actors who had existed before, I think are emboldened because of it being a much more desperate situation. So I think being sensitive to some of those sort of factors in covering and reporting on this topic are important.
Thank you so much, Monica. Rob?
I was going to say, talking about things we've seen before, in some ways, the pandemic and all the things we've had to do to deal with it have exposed problems that have always been around. I think I mentioned this yesterday. One of the things security experts say all the time, which people don't do, is install their security patches when they come out, not when you feel like it or when you think you trust Apple or Microsoft or Google. There was a school district outside Washington, D.C., which had skipped the last 8 or 9 updates to their Blackboard software, and lots of bad things happened. They had people jumping into online classrooms, throwing around anti-Semitic insults, and they had a bunch of other things they did wrong. And yeah, these are mistakes that were made pre-pandemic, but now you have a very bright and hot spotlight being shown on them. And the stress points in our existing communications infrastructure and our security practices, it's much easier to cause things to fracture.
But does media really cover that threats, Luca?
Yes, we cover here in Italy. The impact of coronavirus is very high, so we suffer a lot, and we had to find a way to cover it and to make people also aware of the risks that are the online risks. So, for example, in Wire, we try to cover a lot of the cyber threats that are increasing during the pandemic. Consider that according to a research laboratory here in Italy that is called Fondazione Bruno Kessler, they saw a big increase in fake news related to coronavirus during the first days of the pandemic. So when people are more vulnerable, the increase of fake news and also related to bad links, to phishing and to other cyber threats, increasing a lot. So bad actors try to to get advantage on the real moment when people feel real vulnerable. And there is also other kind of problems. For example, we saw that fake news about the relation between 5G and coronavirus, that is another spreading fake news, has made increase the number of measures that in Italy stopped the experimentation of 5G antennas and small cells. So there is
Thanks
a
God,
big
now
impact
you have
of fake news and
pigeons
cyber
alive.
threats on the reality.
Yeah. If all the pigeons were dead from the 5Gs, then we would need to import pigeons from Mars.
But consider that this is a sort of geopolitical matter to me, because it means that if you want to manipulate the information and the fake news, you can stop the competitiveness of a country in a moment when these countries feel very vulnerable, like is a pandemic, as we are living nowadays. So in Italy, we see an increase of cities, of municipalities that stop the developing of 5G because of a fake news. I think it's a real
not
big
only
problem.
in Italy, I think everywhere, no?
Well, I'm wondering, in Italy, do you have a wing of a political party or commenters on a national TV network that make a point of saying the pandemic is made up, it's all hype, you don't need to wear a mask, the liberal media elites, because that is a big problem here in the United States?
Well, there are other problems also, let's say it mildly.
I like the point that Rob has brought up. Yeah, so it's strange to see how this is playing out along geopolitical lines here in the U.S., where perhaps Democrats are being more concerned or practicing more careful things, but it's also dependent on the news source, right? People's behavior is directly tied to how this crisis is being covered. And the proliferation of fake news and misinformation. I think most of us are getting our news and everything online right now, entertainment, every aspect of our life just about. And it's hard to often know and have that media literacy of, is this a trustworthy place to get this sort of information? So I think just being very careful about recognizing authentic and trustworthy primary sources versus secondary sources, because like lightning fire, the misinformation about 5G or even just more things that come out about the virus, understanding how it proliferates and actually how it works. Misinformation can get picked up by one outlet and then just spread across like wildfire. So I think it's very important that, we're also using the same sort of careful evaluation, right, in terms of our reporting and what we're going to say about this crisis, or as new pieces of information come out, just because there is so much, so many sources that would misinform the public.
It's actually critical thinking that the people in general from journalism needs to have installed in the hardware. So that's the most important thing, because I think people really lack critical thinking. But I would like to hear how this is covered in Middle East from Salim, and then I would like to start wrapping up the problems connected to what Rob has outlined, working in distance, etc. Salim, what about the Middle East coverage of the whole situation, the current threats we face?
Definitely, and we have seen a lot of similar trends, that are occurring across the world, of course. And adding to what Monica said, we have the same problem here of misinformation, that people are receiving information from one source and from another that conflicts. And I think everyone around the world can agree that this is unprecedented. So even the information that we're receiving, whether from scientists or from politicians, we're discovering it as we go along. So one recommendation from my research of speaking to experts, they were saying, is find one source that you can trust. And even though the information is evolving, at least you don't overwhelm yourself with the reactionary type information you could be receiving on Twitter and WhatsApp messages that can really put you in a bad position mentally and also causing you to react. Instead, find that one source that even if it changes from time to time, it's from a trustworthy source, that like, for example, the WHO or your national agency, and that helps you more calmly address these issues. In the Middle East, we've seen a lot of the same phishing emails using fear and anxiety and quick solutions to appeal to people via email. For example, in a story that I'd worked on, someone had received a message saying that your Instagram is in violation of a system policy, and your account will be deleted in 24 hours if you don't act now. And then it creates that sense of urgency for you to quickly react and click on a URL attack that'll take you to a different site. You enter your information, and all of a sudden, all your personal information is out there. So I think it's about educating yourself and being aware. And to address more of your question about the Middle East, one thing that's very popular over here, especially in GCC countries, are lottery winnings. So especially during the holidays, during Ramadan and Eid, where it seems like hackers are attacking a wider range of people for smaller amounts of money, saying that if you respond to this WhatsApp message, you're one of the lucky winners. Please respond to this now to get your winnings and enter your personal information, and then they're able to, even if it's a small amount of money that's untraceable, or unnoticeable from your account, then that's one way that they're appealing to people during this time.
Thank you for sharing, and definitely these are some of the many threats. And now people listening to us, especially those that are not in the cybersecurity area, but even though WEBIT is a community of professional digerati, so there are not that many hidden secrets, especially from what we are discussing, but it's good to wrap up. Now let's talk about this major thing. We all work from home, or many of us work from home. I mean, we are all from home right now.
Yes.
Indeed.
Anyone in, yeah, all of you is home. All right. So currently we are protected. We're in front of everyone and everyone knows where we are, what we do. So it's kind of a protection being public like this. But what are the real challenges of working from home for the employees? And of course, the troubles they might cause to themselves and to the companies they work for. Most of us around the world signed the NDAs and the confidentiality agreements, which involve a lot of clauses about sharing information, etc. But what are the threats of working from home? Monica, maybe to start with you.
Sure, yeah. Right off the bat, I think one of the more obvious ones is going to be kind of having people work for more secure methods, right? So securing that VPN, making sure that all endpoints across devices are going to be covered. People are going to be switching from their phones to their personal computers and back. So those might not always be the most secure places to have information, but yet they're still going to be accessing things from their work. So it creates a difficult situation for employers. Also, because we are remote, we can be working from anywhere. It's not under the same kind of maybe corporate Wi-Fi that's even secured across, the normal level. Maybe it's a public Wi-Fi that's far less secure, so people can unwittingly put themselves in more vulnerable positions. And I think just for employee bases all around, there's a higher level or higher chance of human error right now. I think we're all very distracted, as we should be as humans, with the morbidity of the situation. So it might not create the best sort of secure practices, right? You might just, click on that free easy Wi-Fi while we're moving about, or we might not use that two-factor authentication, stay logged into a place that we shouldn't be. And I think that, things like Zoom bombing, for example, just getting that encrypted or private video session, it's just a little extra step that I think people should do to cover themselves, but also the larger scheme of, okay, we're accessing work things from home now. It might seem like a little extra step, but it's definitely well worth the effort to just try to make your interactions that much more secure right now.
So I heard human error, and obviously it's always about human errors. But thanks God we do mistakes from time to time. But definitely this raises the red flag. Who else will take this one? Yeah,
I want to
please.
build on that because, speaking as one of the parents in this, one of the biggest challenges to working from home is just, your child or children are always there. So you can never actually get out of parent brain mode where you're constantly distracted. So yeah, that increases the chances that you will have too many things on your mind, and you will click on the wrong link because you're trying to do all these jobs that were traditionally separate. I know that I've been working from home full time since 2011, and I have never been
So you're a
as
veteran.
inefficient. Yeah, and I'm so inefficient right now because there's no concept of I'm in my zone. My wife is at work, our kids at school, we're all here. And yeah, it's a lot more work. I thought I knew how to work from home, but maybe not as much as I thought I did.
Yeah, that's a completely different story. We shall be talking about this. We were discussing what will be the companies on the rise, and one of them will be definitely collaboration software, of completely new way, of a completely new level of collaboration, which currently exists if this continues. And we already hear more and more companies stating that you can work from home indefinitely. So it will make a lot of different changes. Salim, you wanted to add something I saw previously?
Definitely, adding on to what Monica and Robert both said, the human error, even before COVID-19, was one of the biggest vulnerabilities many have reported. When it comes to cybersecurity, I remember like someone I interviewed, Jamie Woodruff. He's a young 25-year-old ethical hacker, and he gave a story of where he dressed up as a pizza delivery person and was able to collect enough information from an employee to hack their bank system. And you don't realize how easy it is or how much information we give out generally, that makes us very vulnerable. For example, the last 4 digits of your credit card number, your birth date that you've put online somewhere to celebrate your birthday. All these things we need to really rethink that, just because I haven't been hacked or that I don't know that I've been hacked, you should act as if always you're a victim. And for example, like I'm always covering my camera on my laptop or on my phone when I'm not using it, because, for example, there could be mass software that can hack a certain type of operating system, and then even if they're not directly targeting you, you could be one of the people using that operating system and be a victim. And I think overall, not to be scared by all this, but it's just, we have to learn how to operate in this environment. And I think that's what COVID-19 has done, really highlighting these issues. So yeah, and that's the thing. So like when it comes to human error, it's not only about investing in these cybersecurity systems for corporations, or as we were just saying now, that in our homes, we're merging our work environment with our home environment. Is our home internet safe? Is the computer that we're using or our personal cell phone to do this certain task safe to use? These are things we didn't have to think as much about before, and I think that's what's happening right now, that we're really trying to figure out what's the right way to act. And it's a discovery process, and it will take time, but it's definitely the right time, if not a little too late, to ask them.
Zero trust.
I agree with Rob and Salim when they talk about this big contamination between private life and work life, because many of us were probably forced to do this sort of homework. They don't have a specific device to do their job. So this lack of attention could be very dangerous.
Absolutely. So obviously, we all know that at the end of the day, it's about the human. It's in most of the cases, like I think the statistics was above 90% human error. And that's where I think a lot of investments will be done. But that's where also media is so important to really escalate the challenges of the current world we live in. I mean, there are still people who do not know what the meaning of deep fake is. That you could see with your eyes the president of your country telling you, we need you now, do this and that. It's no more the phone liars and posters, etc. It could be your president, it could be your friend that you know from childhood talking to you over Zoom or whatever, and they can tell you fake things, right?
Yeah, I personally find it disturbing every time I see somebody on Facebook or in a text message or whatever send me a message saying, check out the story, and I'll think, what is this site? I've never heard of it. Look it up, and it turns out it's some very sketchy, not news site that may have taken something that actually happened and was reported in some established TV station, newspaper, whatever. But on the one hand, that means this person is not getting their news from someplace that is worthy of any trust. On the other hand, my industry, that's just another hit we've taken, as the traffic that should be going to the site that actually did the work and the reporting went somewhere else. So it's a problem coming and going.
Definitely, Rob. Well, we have so many questions here. Let me go for a more corporate one, because definitely our audience now 5,900 people live already, growing quite big again. So the topic is truly important. And again, even though our audience is of experts, you always feel like you can learn new things. I would ask you, but not now, but think about it. If you may share the most shocking story you have heard, and you know that it is true, when it comes to any of these practices that we are all exposed to. I would really appreciate if you share these stories, because I believe it's sharing is caring. We should know it. That it's not like no, it doesn't happen to me. It actually happens to everyone. But let's go back. I see now some questions that I would like to hear your takeaway on that. And one is what areas of the budget might a business rebalance to accommodate a potentially higher spend on IT, particularly on CyberTech? Maybe here we can have Rob starting with, and then we move on with the rest of our panelists.
Well, I would imagine if you're going to have people working from home for an extended period of time, and if you're going to say that can be your permanent scenario, you're going to save money on real estate. And so there would be some money to be saved. Of course, I'd also like these companies to then kick back some of those savings to their employees. If you work for yourself, you can claim your home office expenses on your taxes in the United States. Can't do that if you're doing that as an employee and your company is sending you home for the duration. But yeah, obviously, if we're looking at a more decentralized workforce that does not involve having lots of people going to the same corporate campus or skyscraper, real estate is not cheap. So there's money you could be putting into your IT and cybersecurity budget.
Great. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Monica, could you give us examples from your practice that offer solutions to all problems that we just pointed out?
Sure. Yeah. In terms of reallocating budgets, one of the more kind of obvious ones might be any lines of business that imbibe a high human touch point. Right now, that's going to be kind of at a standstill. Anything where there's a live event, those typically can bring in a lot of revenue for companies, but now those are having to move online. But you can usually do so at a much lower cost. That's what I've been hearing from a couple of companies. And also places, in the budget for travel expenses, right? We're conducting this over this virtual forum, but you've saved on airfare, you've saved on what you would normally allocate in that budget. This is going to look a little bit different for each company, if they're B2B, B2C, what their actual product or service is. But also, what Rob pointed out, real estate, travel, and, sort of in-person things are going to free up a lot of money.
Thank you so much, Monica. If we go from corporate to government, I have a question for you, Luca. Do you think that the state of surveillance is becoming a wordum? Do you think that this is something that we should be kind of careful?
I think we should, because I read, I think it's 2 days ago, that the municipality of Hangzhou in China is deciding to make its contact tracing app a permanent tracking health app. So every day there is something that will track you. So, or moving a little bit near to me in France, French government is planning to implement some artificial intelligence tools into the underground to check whether passengers are wearing face masks or not. So the problem is, if you let these watchdogs come in once, could you then let them stay there together forever and ever? And so where do we put put the limit? And I think that this is a challenge for democratic states, because and they should find a balance and counterbalance between the solution. Because for sure technology is very useful in this fighting the COVID-19 and all these threats that are coming from the pandemic, but we have to write down where is the limit, when the limit comes out, and decide when we stop, because otherwise I think that we are building easily a surveillance state.
Are media prepared to fight for these rights and for what you just said? What do you think?
I think so. I don't know if every media is prepared, but I hope so.
But Wired is tech media. It's easy to say.
Well, Wired, yes. In Wired we are ready, but
yeah.
I hope that we are. If I look at the Italian, scenario, I think that we have to push him more on issues and topics like privacy and cybersecurity, because they are getting more and more important to the life of people. So we have to care more about in each media outlet.
I can't agree more. And I would be happy to have that discussion in a little bit different angle from Middle East with Salim. Salim, can you please tell me what are the cybersecurity issues that you believe are underestimated in Middle East? And do you feel like you have too much of a surveillance? Because I think Middle East, from my own perspective, has been already building up. For example, in Dubai, when I was first there many years ago, I was surprised there were more cameras than in London. And then I found that and then Dubai became the first to start adopting, I think now there are watchdogs for police service, etc. So does it become the new normal?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think, and as you said, in the region generally, or in certain countries, I can't see everyone's acting the same way, but people want that from their governments to a certain extent to know, for example, like when COVID-19 became a big issue, or at least when it was recognized, for the first case that happened here in January towards the end of the month, people wanted to see like a genuine reaction from their governments. They wanted to see that they were taking the matter seriously. And I think as everyone here has been discussing, that of course people do want to, they are, when they're fearful, they're willing to give up more personal information, more be more vulnerable in that sense to their governments to get protection. But of course it is a very important thing to know where the fine line is with that. For example, in not just countries in the Middle East, but outside as well, there have been applications where governments have touted as a good thing, where you can identify when there are people near you that have COVID-19 and to stay away from them. That sounds a little troubling to me, because there are so many problems around that. Imagine if an app first of all divulges that type of personal information, and then what kind of fear that's going to put between people, and it's like a new form of discrimination. And that's something we should be really careful about. And as journalists, I think that's where the counterbalance is to governments, taking these types of actions, is that we need to question it. We need to say, what is the positive? What's too much? And so, yeah, that's what I think. Like, even as governments are, increasing surveillance, to better protect people, there's also that other side, which I think we as journalists address with our actions in our reporting.
Absolutely, Salim. And when I was asking Middle East, I was not generalizing, but because you have a better point of view for that region. Obviously, that's everywhere. And Luca already outlined that it's happening in China, but we have the contact tracing currently almost everywhere. So that's why I was surprised yesterday when We heard from the experts saying, yeah, it's just another app. It's kind of a different type of app, but still, yeah. So let's talk a little bit, because we don't have too much time left, unfortunately. As usual, time is never enough, but with great panelists and people to discuss with. I have two more topics I would like to touch base. Most probably we have to choose one. First is general about Internet of Things and the connected devices. And the second one, talking about healthcare. Which one would you vote for to have a discussion until for the next 9 minutes of this show? Because we cannot cover both. Who would like to go for healthcare?
Healthcare.
Healthcare.
Sure. Could do that.
Okay, healthcare. Healthcare is the key for our privacy. You cannot be more exposed than people knowing what you suffer of, what your challenges are, and that's the easiest way to control you. And now we have so many apps, we have so many doctors you can talk on demand, online, etc. Where is it heading? How the healthcare system, do you believe, could fight back for the privacy? Monica?
Sure, yeah. One of the initial things I think is going to be really getting control over data. So off-siting those electronic health records, because those are often the, the center of these ransom attacks of saying, we'll take all of your information, all of your patient data that you need to treat people offline, unless you give us X amount of dollars. So if you can get that to a more secure platform, more of the new age cloud-based applications are going to have that built-in security. So that's one assurance. I think heightening awareness around your team, doing trainings about, these are suspicious emails. This is how to tell the difference. This is what a primary trustworthy source is versus where not to click on, where not to get your information. Making that information available to your team, bolstering whatever cybersecurity efforts and money that you do have to increase protections, but empowering people so that they actually know how to use those things, more importantly. And then if worse comes to worse, also getting that cyber insurance. A lot of these attacks, there's been piecemeal across the US, too many to even name in just about every state, but a lot of them have resulted in having to pay out money. Healthcare systems are already strapped and the demand is so high. It's one of the absolute essential essential things that we need right now. So I think the desperation starts to play in and hackers feed on that. So I think if you have your bases covered, prevention is going to be better than the cure of having to pay out a lot of money.
Thank you so much, Monica. Salim?
Yeah, I think even when it comes to healthcare, it kind of mirrors what we were talking about, from remote work environments to misinformation. It's education. It's because, for example, one thing that I found my reporting about, healthcare, everyone's concerned about not being exposed to the coronavirus, to COVID-19. But then, when they're sitting at home and they have very little physical activity, they're not sleeping well because they're not getting sun exposure, and their body isn't, in rhythm to get a good night's rest. All these things lower immunity. And from, it's our healthcare systems to our habits, these are all things, that we need to really educate ourselves on. Even when talking about remote work environments, it seems like the biggest issue that people have is engagement. And that could maybe be categorized closer to mental health issues and communication, where,
yes,
as they say that most of communication is nonverbal. What happens when you're relying on screens and distant tasks, that you just receive from your manager to act? How does that affect you? How does that affect your engagement? There's so many facets to how, what we're calling healthcare, even, merging with technology, merging with cybersecurity. And these are all questions that we need to ask. And these are the questions that we need to ask now for tomorrow.
Definitely. Wise words. Thank you so much. Luca?
You mentioned before that companies should reallocate budget to invest more on cybersecurity. I think that this is important and crucial for the alpha infrastructure and for hospitals too. I see in Italy the situation is there is a low quality on security infrastructure of hospitals. I think that they need a lot of more investments because they manage critical information, and there is a lot of radiographies, clinical documents all over the internet. So I hope that national health system use also the COVID-19 emergency to focus more on security and to address investment on that kind of allocation of the budget.
Thank you so much, Luca. Rob, what is your take on that?
So we talked before about the risks when you have a forced transition to remote work. That's really been the case with U.S. healthcare, where telemedicine, people have realized, oh, it really is a good idea because we can't actually go to the doctor's office. But there's so much of health IT is bad and really antiquated, where you go to a new doctor and they want you to provide your social security number. You have to explain to them, no, you don't actually need that to identify me, and that there's all these paper records, and it's a huge mess. And what's the ideal time to get out of that and to advance to a digital world? Not now, but we're doing it anyways. And again, that seems to me to put a lot more stress on the system, and there are more ways that things could break.
Last question for all of you, and I'll try to make it very, very brief question for a very, very brief answer. Are we prepared for the future as it comes, empowered by algorithms and artificial intelligence that is faster than operations our brain can take? Are we prepared, not technologically, obviously technology is growing. Are we prepared as a society? Monica.
Sure. I'd like to think that we are. I want to leave this on an optimistic note, but I think that a bit more needs to be done about education about new technologies. We fear what we don't understand. So these things have the power to really advance and improve our lives, but there's things about, bias and that are concerns about AI alone, much less all the other things that are going to develop out of the new technologies themselves. So we're nearly there in terms of being more accepting of the sort of the next wave of technology, but there's more work to be done, I think.
Thank you so much. Salim?
I'll take the other side of that. So I'd say no, we're not ready yet. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's human nature, that we're like, when it comes to climate change or this, we are usually late to react. But I think, this again is unprecedented. So it's okay. We're now recognizing the problem. People are learning how to respond. They're seeing the mistakes that are taking place. They're changing actions. And I think that, that is human nature. And slowly we are recognizing things that we need to do. I know I have, at least, like I'm changing my personal practices, my viewpoints about, what about this this lockdown, my mental health, working from home all the time. So yeah, I think that we as a society are going to have to work together on this to move forward in a positive way.
Thank you so much, Salim. Luca and Rob, your takes, Luca?
I don't think that we are ready, and I hope that politics put these kind of topics more in the center of their program and try to explain more to people, because we need the people trust in the technology.
Thank you so much, Luca. Rob?
So I'm thinking about what Salim just said. Think about how billions of people have radically altered their daily routines. And we're not sure how long we're going to have to do it, but we are doing it. And so that makes me, I tend to think in the long run, humanity does find a way to prevail, even if, as Winston Churchill said of the United States, we only do the right thing after we've tried everything else. I think we will figure it out, but there's going to be a lot of mess to clean up.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and ideas. We feel very privileged to have you with us, part of our WEBIT community and our global family. And I think you all wrapped up one word at the end of this wonderful discussion. And if I can say which this word was, it was education. Education, being educated, being prepared. So this is a wonderful connection to our next week theme. We're talking about the future of work and education. That's the week of future and of work and education. We shall be having the right people to talk to. when it comes to the future of work and education. We have the founder of one of the largest educational platforms in the world, the Khan Academy, and we have Sal Khan, the founder, being with us in the studio, along with someone very special to my heart, the godmother of the Silicon Valley, as she's famous with that name, with that nickname, Esther Wojcicki, who is the mother of 3 fantastic ladies, the CEO of YouTube, Susan, the founder of 23andMe, Anne, and her third daughter being doctor, scientist. It's so a wonderful lady to talk about, and she herself being a teacher and wearing so many hats during the years. So it will be a fantastic edition of Thought Leadership Summit on the future of work and education. We will be together with a journalist from CNN. And then we continue with the Founders Games, the Investors Demo Day, with some of the best global startups in future of work and education, paving the way ahead. And then again, my favorites, the media, the leading media forum. We'll be having leading journalists from some of the top, again, global media outlets. You'll see them on the screen. All of this happening next week. In the meantime, wishing you a wonderful Friday and hopefully a sunny weekend. Thank you all for being with us. A special thanks to the panelists. Thank you so much. It's always great pleasure having some of the brightest people with us here in the studio. Looking forward to welcome you back. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
This program is powered by thevirtual.show, making your offline events virtual.